In my day job, unfortunately, I don't get to do this like all the time. In my day job, I work for a ministry called Child Evangelism Fellowship, and our ministry is teams of people to go and share the gospel with kids, like and where they are. So our one of our primary, two of our big primary focuses. One of them is to get into the public schools, because public schools we have equal access rights to get into a school for like an after-school club. So if there's a 4-H club, if there's a Boy Scouts, if there's a Girl Scouts, if there's any outside group that has a club at that school and has access to that school to use it, we have equal access rights under the Constitution to be in there. So we train up a team, go in immediately after school. The kids get dismissed. They, if they have a parent permission slip signed up, then they can be released to our team. They then go and have an hour of Bible lesson and a memory verse and missionary stories, kind of like having Awana in the public school. It's one of the coolest things in the world. And a couple of opportunities that I want to make you guys aware of. One of them is our big thing coming up this October, on October 18th. It's a Saturday night. We have what we do is a pie auction. It's our big fundraiser for the year. We're going to be at Faith Bible Church, which is just down the road here in Big Lake. You guys are all welcome to come. It's free dinner. But it is a fundraiser. And one of the neat things that we do is what we do is if you are all sitting at a table together and you guys say, hey, let's go in together and buy a pie. You guys can split a pie, and you guys can auction and bid on pies and make a donation through that bidding. And as you get that pie, then you can eat that pie. And they're like really, really good pies, because we get these ladies that have been making these pies for years. But so that's one. It's a Saturday night. You guys are all welcome. Talk to Luke about it. He said that'd be a cool thing for you guys all to go do together. Although if you guys all come, we'll have to set up a couple extra tables, because I understand that there's going to be a few folks there. That, and then we also have clubs going on through the school year that if you would like to, if it's something that you would, it's on your heart, say, man, I'd love to be a part of that ministry. We have a club going on at Big Lake, at Big Lake Elementary School. We have another one going on at Meadow Lakes Elementary School, just down the road, a little bit further. If you want to get involved in helping out with the Good News Club, they meet in the afternoons, so it's kind of in your free time area. It's just once a week, so it's not a huge commitment. So if you got wheels and you want to try, or you want to help out with that, let me know. I'll get you plugged in. The other thing is, Mark was talking about churches, and I've realized I've been remiss to invite you guys to my church. So we're at Pioneer Baptist Church in Meadow Lakes, which is again, it's about maybe 30 minutes down the road. So if you're used to driving to get to church, it's if you go down, get on the Parks Highway, drive the Parks Highway down to Pittman. That's where the Three Bears is. As you're coming into Wasilla, there's a Three Bears there. Make a left at Three Bears, go up Pittman Road. It's about a mile or so up the road is Meadow Lakes Loop Drive, and it's right there off of Meadow Lakes Loop Drive. Yeah. Yeah, that's where David Eastman goes. Yeah. So yeah, you guys are welcome to come to church with us. We've got churches at 10:15, Sunday schools at 9. We also have Awana on Wednesday nights. I missed it last night. I get to teach the Puggles, which is my favorite part. I get to hang out with the 1.5, 2-year-olds. It's a big shift from college age students, but they listen better. Actually, no. Well, they cry more. Well, no, they don't. Never mind. But we are still looking for some help with Awana. We just had one of our guys was our cubby leader. We ended up oddly enough with no cubbies this year. We got all of our other clubs are filled to the brim, but we have 0 cubbies for some reason. And so he was going to help out with the Sparks, and he had a surgery. and I'm not sure how they even did this, but in his surgery, they nicked his diaphragm. And so, like, he's not able to, like, get enough breath to talk. And so it's like, he's like apologizing, I'm not going to be able to teach. And I was like, Scott, this is the Lord's doing, because, you were the cubby leader, and now, you can just kind of back up people and help out and be there with the kids, and you don't need to talk, because and so just a blessing that we just happen to not have any cubbies this year. But actually, if you can be praying for Scott, he's hoping that will heal and that he'll be able to get that back, and that's not any kind of permanent damage. But anyway, so yeah, if you're looking to help out with Awana or something like that on Wednesday nights, we could use some help there at our church. All right, that's all the things I have for announcements. Let's see here. Okay. Anything you guys saw in your papers, in your as you read, as you answered the questions, what are some things that you guys saw this last evening, yesterday afternoon? Yeah. Yeah.
I understood the time dilation.
Right.
I don't understand. Like he's saying, well, maybe it arrived at, it's like, isn't, a day is still a day.
Right. So, yeah, without getting into the special relativity of it all, basically, as you approach the speed of light, as you travel faster and faster, time slows down. Right, that's, or at least your perception of time slows down in relation to other things that are not moving as fast. The constant of the speed of light is what it is, right? It's, I forget what the exact number is, but it's been measured. Yeah, it's a big number. Right? It's really fast. And so for instance, it takes light 8 minutes to get from the sun to us. And we can measure that. It takes a certain number of seconds to get from the moon to us. Right? There's actual amount of time. We know that it's not just speed of sound, it's the speed of actual light itself it takes to get to us. The question in that chapter is if we are observing changes in stars like supernova or something of that nature, and those stars can be measured at billions of light years away, then how can we say that light is only a couple thousand years old if it took 4 billion years to get here and we're actually seeing something change in it, right? And of course, one of the first things is well, when God created the star, he also created the light and all of the time, all of the events that could have happened with that star all happened at once. That's an answer. I don't think I think it's Jason Lyle that answered that one in the book. He doesn't like that answer. Instead, what he goes with is what he calls cosmic local time. That the speed of light isn't a constant for the universe, but rather just a constant for our observable area around us. Once you get past really the solar system, and especially the galaxy, we have no idea what's out there, right? And in fact, and again, this is just as much a problem for secular scientists as it is for creation scientists, because they have to answer for why isn't the night sky completely light? I mean, we're talking billions upon trillions of stars, and if there's nothing between us and that star, why is our night sky mostly dark? I mean, if there's nothing between us and the star for that star's light to get to us, why is that star dim? Right there, and so anyway, I don't know all of the details of the science for it, but basically he's saying that the cosmic constant of the speed of light, or that it is a speed limit, could potentially be local, and he explains all the science behind that.
Like it could be a lot faster, but because of
Right.
how we see it,
Right.
our particular gravity in our system,
Right.
we measure it as this, but that doesn't mean that it's the same.
Right. Right. And like I said, almost all scientists recognize that the speed of light being a cosmological constant that is set is something that is not universal, right? They know that it, like for instance, at the Big Bang, in their models, the Big Bang has to have inflated to close to where it is now. There's no possible way that within just a few seconds, the universe got to where it is within a few seconds without breaking the speed of light, right? And the whole inflationary model thing. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
everything else was cool and everything else made sense, but the
Yeah.
I think that I had understanding is he tried to use like time zones as a way to describe it.
Yeah, and again, he's using that as an analogy. He's not trying to make that's what it is. He's not saying that's how it works. He's trying to just use that as kind of think of it in this way as an analogy.
It was like 1 in the morning. I was like, this ain't clicking. Maybe I'll
Right. Yeah. Yes.
I was trying to understand the gravitational well part.
Uh-huh.
When it's describing Earth as like within a gravitational well.
Yeah, so the way that gravity works, and I'm not set up to do this experiment because it's not actually a physics class, but think about a trampoline, okay? In a trampoline, if you have something that is, and basically all of space-time is on kind of a stretched out piece of cloth, as it were, right? And if you put something heavy in the middle of that trampoline, what's going to happen? Right? It sags. It goes down. Now everything that's on that trampoline is going to do what? It's going to roll toward that well. That's what a gravity well is. Okay, it's everything is drawn to it as if it's being sucked in, as if there's actually it's the denser the object, the larger the object, the more it creates a gravity well that then things get sucked into. And then a black hole, of course, is infinitely dense, and nothing can escape a black hole. Even light can't escape a black hole. That's why it's a black hole. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
Question, kind of like thinking back on yesterday. Why is it that all the planets are on a flat plane?
My answer is God made it that way. The evolutionary answer is a little more complicated, but basically it's because of let's take that trampoline, right? And basically you've got, because the sun itself is spinning, all of the objects in the solar system are spinning, and according to their model, if everything kind of exploded or blew up or whatever it is, whatever term they use, and it sends things hurtling out, and they're spinning, but there's still gravity, they're drawn to it, they're going to pull toward it, but as they're doing so, they're spinning, and as things spin, if it all has the same, and if it's all the same explosion, and they're all spinning in the same direction, then they're all going to be spinning around together. That's why Saturn has rings, because that's actually very likely, again, my opinion, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this, is that the rings of Saturn used to be a moon. And then it broke up, and now it's just a bunch of debris. Well, eventually, as it's orbiting that planet and circling around that planet, it's flattened out into a disk. And so the solar system does the same thing. It flattens out into a disk as it spins. Okay? Just like if you were to take a thing and you spin it like that, you know those toys where you spin it like this and the things go out like this, and if it's spinning, it'll eventually all flatten out, right? The problem is, and this is where scientists have a real problem, because when God designed the solar system, I think he did so to play a trick on the scientists, because it's one thing that the Earth spins like 23 degrees on its axis, and Mars is about 24 degrees on its axis. Right? It's not spinning parallel to the plane. It's off a little bit. And Mars is off a little bit. And Jupiter is off just a little bit. Venus spins backwards. Uranus spins on its side. It's like tumbling, like this. Right? They don't spin right. It spins sideways. Uranus actually has a small ring, very small ring, and you can actually see that Uranus is on its side because its ring goes this way instead of this way. And even Saturn's rings are tilted quite a bit. But yeah, then Venus spins backwards. It's like, so it couldn't have been spinning with everything else spinning and going in the same direction. So they're like, well, Venus must have just come from another universe or another galaxy or another solar system and just kind of got trapped in our solar system. It's like it's the redheaded stepchild of our solar system. Poor Venus. Already gets the bad rap because it's associated with Satan. The morning star, right? Lucifer, the morning star. That's Venus. All right, where are we at here? Any other points from your homework? No? All right, well, let's get into it. Instead of having you pick this first one, I'm going to go ahead and pick this first one. I don't think that you guys are going to be too upset, though, because I'm just going to go ahead and pick Noah's flood to start with. No, I don't want to share. I don't want to share. What if I don't share? I want a slideshow. The share button shouldn't be right next to the show button, and it shouldn't be a brighter color than the show button. Okay. So I'm just going to do Noah's flood to start with because I want to, and I'm the teacher. All right. I need my clicker. Where's my clicker? Can't advance the slides without clickers. Here we go. The reason why I want to do Noah's flood is I think I've talked to a lot of you in conversations at meal times, but I'm going to take you back to the early days of the teaching of evolution. Back when Charles Darwin had written on Origin of Species, 1859, so middle of the 19th century. This is just toward the end of our Civil War. This is toward the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign in England, so the Victorian era. This is when Charles Darwin published that book, the liberal world was ready, and you already had writers and thinkers like Karl Marx coming up in this time period. You have liberal theologians that are that are coming out. We had people that are questioning the Bible itself, questioning whether or not the Bible is in fact the Word of God, or if it's some kind of liberal theologians such as Karl Wellhausen, who was questioning whether the books of Moses were actually written by Moses, and that was gaining steam. So toward the end of the 19th century, you had a massive swing away from biblical ideas, away from the church, away from the conservative church, and particularly away from creationism. And as they were looking for answers, they began to find, this is archaeology became a huge thing. Because they were trying to disprove the Bible. They were trying to come up, did the events of the Bible actually happen? There's a lot of disenfranchisement with the church at that time. And so as archaeologists went out and they started discovering these bones in fossils, they started discovering these dinosaurs, these crazy-looking animals that are buried in the earth that we don't have any evidence of. And so these naturalists, they always called themselves naturalists, and as the ability to sail around the world became easier and easier and easier, and you have steam vessels and you have ocean liners that could get people across the ocean very quickly, they would go and explore, and they would go to these islands. That's why Charles Darwin ends up in the Galapagos Islands, and he's studying these finches and trying to come up with answers for the age of the earth. As his theory of evolution gets popular, based mostly on the fossils, that this idea that there were ages and ages and ages of time that the Bible doesn't talk about, that where the dinosaurs ruled, when all these crazy looking animals ruled, right? Well, in the late 1800s, the church didn't have an answer for that. All of these intellectuals are running around town giving lectures about how the Bible is wrong because of all these things buried in fossils. So what was their answer? Their answer was, well, Satan probably put those bones there to confuse us, to throw us off the scent, to make us question our faith. And so don't believe it. These are all fake. These are all lies. This is what the devil wants you to believe. Well, that wasn't a very good answer. In fact, it was hyper anti-intellectual. And it failed because, number one, it was a lie in and of itself. I think it was almost, if I were to guess which one was actually the lie of the devil, it was probably the lie of the devil that had all of these Christian scholars telling people that it was the lie of the devil, instead of coming up with a real answer. All right, so fast forward a few years, you get to the turn of the 20th century. Early 20th century, very, very late 19th century, early 20th century, you had some thinkers, and we skipped this one in the book, that came up with this idea called the gap theory, where maybe there's a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, that after he created the earth, right? Created the earth, the heavens and the earth, and then the earth became without form and void. The Hebrew kind of allows it. The words themselves allow it. The vocabulary allows it. Just like I said before, at the very first day, right? I could be shoving the stroller up the nose of the elephant, right? The words do allow for it, but the context doesn't. So they did all of this sleight of hand to make the words say that it became without form and void after this age of dinosaurs. And by the way, it also gave them a handy-dandy place to put Satan and the rebellion of the demons. And then they could just put this war that happens, and really the angels and demons were actually just this race of men, just like we are, and they were just like Earth 1.0, or maybe Earth 0.95. They were like God's first attempt at creating a people group that could worship him, and now we're living in kind of their post-apocalyptic era after he wiped everything clean and it became without form and void. But somehow left all of the fossils and all of the bones there. This became very popular. It was popularized in a couple of different study Bibles that became very popular. The most popular of which was, of course, the Scofield Reference Bible, published in 1909. Now, before you go too concerned about Scofield, almost everything else Scofield said was actually really, really good. The guy was a great biblical scholar. But when it came to Genesis 1, this was the prevalent idea of the day. And so he went with it. What he was trying to do was trying to reconcile God's word is accurate and inerrant and to be interpreted literally, and trying to reconcile that with the evidence we had in the ground. Fast forward then, a full 50 years after Scofield, 50 years after Scofield, is actually 52 years, 1961, not quite in time for the 100th anniversary of Charles Darwin's On Origin of Species. They tried to get it in 1959. The book wasn't ready. Ended up getting published in 1961. 1961 was this book right here. This is The Genesis Flood by Henry Morris and John Wickham. Henry Morris and John Wickham was a professor at Grace Theological Seminary in Winona Lake, Indiana. That's where I got my master's degree. Henry Morris was a scientist who was he studied like fluid dynamics. He studied, what is that called? Hydroelectric, or hydro power and stuff like that. He, like flow of water, like that was his doctorate was in that. Hydrology, there it is. I knew there was a word in there somewhere. He studied hydrology, which meant he knew a lot about how water works. And they got together, a theologian and a scientist got together, and they said, guys, we have an answer. We don't have to make one up. We don't have to try to shove one in between two verses. All right? We have an answer for why there's billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. We know exactly why. The Bible tells us that there was a flood. And so what they developed was that what they called catastrophism. Biblical catastrophism. The idea is that all of the answers of when the fossils got there, how the fossils got there, and really anything on our earth can be and should be explained via the global flood. And so this is, I believe, central to a young earth creationist view. Understanding a global catastrophic flood just as the Bible describes it. Okay? This is, by the way, a hallmark of what I introduced you guys to on day one, which is biblical literalism. That if you are a biblical literalist, in other words, you believe that the Bible says what it says and means what it says, then you read it and it says that the whole earth was covered with a flood, and you believe that the whole earth was covered with a flood because that's what the Bible says. All right? And if the Bible indicates that the earth is only about 6,000 years old, rather than billions of years old, then you're going to believe the Bible over man's ideas. Okay, that's biblical literalism. So let's talk about this flood. We're going to look a little bit at Scripture, but I also want to then look at the plausibility of this idea. Is this even plausible? Is this even possible that the earth could have been flooded with every high hill, every mountain covered, or is this just a fairy tale? Is this just a myth? Okay. We talked about, I think it was the very first day we talked about in archaeology, we talked about some of the flood myths that prevailed in the earliest ancient days, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. You had flood myths. In fact, that's not the only one. There's flood myths all over the world that usually go right along with a creation myth. So let's talk about Noah's flood. The common perception today is that the flood is just a myth or a children's story. I do agree with Ken Ham on this. If you have something that looks like that on your nursery wall, paint over it. Paint over it. That's not only wrong, I think that's dangerous. Because you're starting out children at the earliest age to think that's what the Bible looks like, to think that's what actually happened. So when they get older and this is the image they have of Noah's Ark, if this is the image they have, then they're going to be like, of course that's unplausible. Of course that's impossible. Of course that's just a myth. Of course it's a children's tale. Because it's been told to them as a children's tale. It's been told to them as a myth. That's not only is that not even possible, that's like, yeah, there's nothing biblical about that picture. All right, first of all, let's see if I can find a couple of things really quickly. Let's see here. You have horses and donkeys. You wouldn't have horses and donkeys on there. I was hoping that they'd have two different kinds of dogs. There wouldn't be two different kinds of dogs. There's certainly not two of every kind of animal. Yeah, it's obviously not big enough. All right. There would be at least 7 sheep, not just the one. 14, actually, 7 pairs. Okay. I mean, there's so much wrong with that. Scripture's claim, however, is that this is an actual historical event where God judged all of mankind and all of the earth in one single event that took place over a period of a little over a year. Yes, the rains prevailed, or the rains continued for 40 days and 40 nights upon the earth. And then it stopped raining, but the waters prevailed for at least another year after that. All right, and then after that, it took who knows how long. I think we're still kind of living in the after effects of the flood. Things are still kind of settling out, even 6,000 years later. We talked about the Ice Age and how the glaciers are still melting. I think they're still melting from the flood, either during or just after the flood. By the way, the reason why we can drive cars is because of the flood. Do you know what we use to power our cars with? What do we use to power our cars with? Gasoline. What is gasoline made of? It's fossil fuels. You know why it's called a fossil fuel? It's because there's billions of dead things that were buried by water under the earth and liquefied into a carbonite goo that we can then pump out of the ground. And amazing, this stuff burns really well. Yeah, amazing. Things that God judged burns real well. Interesting. And you say, well, yeah, but we don't use gasoline cars anymore. We have electric cars. We don't use fossil fuels for electric cars, right? Except for the 95% of your electricity comes from either coal, burning coal, which is plants that were buried in the flood, or natural gas, which was trapped when when all those billions of dead things died and released natural gas, okay, called methane. Right, and so you either burn the natural gas or you burn the coal to make to spin the turbines to make the electricity to power your car. Either way, you're using fossil fuels. The only way to not use fossil fuels is to use solar, wind, or nuclear. Those are the non-fossil fuels. All right, I always cringe. I really cringed when I heard this the first time, but I don't know if it was some electric company or something. I don't even know what the advertisement was for. It actually may have been more of even a public service announcement on the radio. And they were saying, oh, we shouldn't use fossil fuels. We need to power our cars with the most abundant resource on earth, electricity. I'm sorry, what? The most abundant resource? Electricity is not a resource. Electricity is not a commodity. Electricity is something that is produced by a resource. Anyway, all right. Let's see here. Okay, so Scripture's claim that this is historical. Purpose of this study then is to answer those most common questions about the ark. So this is actually closer. I don't know if you guys, how many of you guys have been to the Ark Encounter in Cincinnati, Kentucky, whatever? It's right around there. Oh wow, you guys are a little bit ahead of me. I've been to the Creation Museum 3 times. All of them were before the Ark Encounter was built, and so I haven't been back since they completed it. My last trip there was in 2015. Well before it was built, just like they were in the process of building it. It was almost completed, but it wasn't open yet. Still like to get out there at some point. Okay, it's big, right? It's huge. That's one of the first things that you notice when you're driving up to the Ark Encounter. They tried to design it like they did Disney, like Disney World, where the parking lot's way over here. And then they've got stuff in the way, and so then you have to kind of go through the gates, and then it isn't until you're actually in the park before you actually see the castle. I mean, the ark, right? Noah's castle, in the middle of the park. Yeah. You can see it on the interstate, yeah. So it's not quite like Disney where everything is fully hidden. But yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of hard to hide, right? That thing's not built with forced perspective like the stuff at Disney, right? Cinderella's castle at Disney World is built with forced perspective. So like the first floor is like normal height, and then the third floor is like a 2/3 height, and the third floor is like a quarter height. That thing's like only this big. The third floor, it's not the same size, but because you're looking up at it, it just looks huge. All right, that's not built with forced perspective, but this is, what they did was they tried to make this to the specs that the Bible gives. We'll talk about those, okay, the dimensions themselves. According to the Ark Encounter, what they used was what's called a royal cubit. Okay, a cubit, of course, we see in Scripture in Genesis chapter 6. God gives the dimensions, Genesis 6:15. Okay, what are those dimensions in Genesis 6:15? He says, "And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, its height 30 cubits." And you say, what in the world is a cubit? Anybody know what is a cubit? Good job. Thank you, Nathan. No. I said, good job. You raised your hand like this. I said, good job. That's exactly right. You didn't even have to say it. Right? It's from your elbow to the tip of your finger. Okay? In fact, the word cubit comes from an Egyptian word meaning elbow. And so it's from the elbow to the tip of the finger. Of course, everyone's forearm and hand and fingers are different lengths, right? There's some people with longer ones and shorter ones. Well, of course, but so whose arm to use as a standard? Use the king's, right? It's the king's standard. But there's a lot of evidence that the kings like to exaggerate how long their arm was, right? And so they would add like another breadth of the hand to their cubit. And so a royal cubit many times was upwards of, and this is actually the cubit used in the pyramids. If I'm not mistaken, the Great Pyramids used the royal cubit. And so it's about 20, I think, 20.4, I think is the number that they used for the royal cubit. If you want a real quick way to calculate it in your head, just think 18 inches, which is 1.5 feet. So just take any number that's a cubit in the Bible and multiply it times 1.5. So like divide it by 2 and add that to the number. Okay, so if you're going from 30, it's 45. You have to go from 300, it's 450, right? It's pretty easy to calculate. Just multiply it by 1.5. But they used the royal cubit, so they didn't go 450. They went 510, 510 feet long, 85 feet wide, 51 feet high. That's pretty big. 510 feet long. How long is it? Does anybody know how long a football field is? How long is a football field? How many feet? What's that? 300 feet. Well, so the playing field of a football field is 300 because it's 100 yards. A yard is 3 feet. So the playing field from end zone to end zone is 300 feet. You add an additional 10 yards to each side, so an additional 30 feet, so it's 330. Okay, is that right? No, 360. Is that right? So 360 for a football field because you have 2 end zones. All right, so this is about half more than that. So maybe a football field and a half. It's similar in portions to a modern destroyer or what's called a feeder-sized cargo ship. So not like the big ocean liner of cargo ships, but a feeder. This is the USS, Arleigh Burke. Okay, that's USS Arleigh Burke. That's a standard destroyer size. Okay, and this is what's called a feeder ship. You can see how many containers can go on that ship if you stack them that way. All right. This would have been not just I believe this would have been the largest wooden ship ever built up until modern times, and even still modern times. There's been 2 attempts at building an ark. The Ark Encounter in Kentucky is not the first. There was another guy that also did it. His is actually floating. I forget where that is, but he used the smaller cubit, so his is only like 450 feet long. I say only 450 feet long. It's still pretty big. All right, but yeah, this size, by the way, the word ark itself in the Hebrew does not mean boat. Although we always call it a boat because it's on the water. The word ark instead is used 2 other times in the Old Testament. You know both of them. The first is at the beginning of the book of Exodus when Moses as a baby is taken by his mother down to the Nile River and put in a basket. That basket is called an ark. Okay? It's something that you put something in and float it on the water. All right. There's one other ark. Anybody want to take a stab at what the other ark is? What is it? The Ark of the Covenant. What is the Ark of the Covenant? Basically, it's a chest, right? It's a chest. It's a box, right? It's a box. That's roughly the translation of the word ark. Is box. Okay. It's a box. By the way, they also in ancient times, although they didn't bury their dead this way. How did they bury their dead? They wrapped them in cloth, threw them in a cave, or perhaps in a collective grave, and just buried them. They didn't put them in boxes, but it is a word that in modern Hebrew is related to the modern Hebrew word for coffin. So it's a box. It's a box that you put things in. Okay. All right. The ark would have been built and optimized for strength. Okay. The wood that they used, and particularly because they not only built the ship with strong wood, hard wood, they also then covered it inside and out with pitch. Now, I want you to be careful here because that was not tar, but rather pitch. Tar is itself a fossil fuel. It's a remnant of the flood itself. Tar is a petroleum product, and would be actually dead things that have decomposed over thousands of years or hundreds of years at least. So they didn't have tar, but rather they probably created pitch using sap or gum from a tree and ash to create that pitch. But it would have been waterproof. It would have been able to seal the boat and would have given it additional strength. Yeah.
Even if you just burn pine tar or pine pitch, you get
Yeah.
tar substance.
That's right. Yeah. So it was probably cooked in some way, burned or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Okay, for strength, for stability. I watched the whole thing on this because I wanted to hear, what other people say about this, not just what do the biblical creationists say about this. And I was watching this video because I was also thinking, well, maybe I could show you guys this video because it's interesting to kind of see what the other side thinks. But then I thought, yeah, that's kind of a waste of time. Well, what he was saying was actually quite ridiculous because, so one of the big problems that ships have, the bigger you make them, the longer you make them specifically, all right, as they are moving in the ocean, it has to deal with waves and swells. All right, as the water is undulating underneath the boat, all right, water goes up and down. It waves. It crests and it falls, valleys and peaks, and sometimes that can be dozens of feet, hundreds of feet, and if we're talking global catastrophic flood with the fountains of the deep breaking open, we're probably talking about tidal waves this world hasn't seen since. All right, so we're talking massive waves, hundreds of feet tall. So they said, well, I mean, if it's that long and that thin, what ends up happening, and this has happened to the one of the larger wooden ships ever built, I forget what the name of it was now. They built a wooden ship, one of the largest wooden ships ever built, and it was sailing along, and it peaked. If you've ever driven something along in the snow, right, and then all of a sudden you get high pointed, right, on the snow. Your wheels are on both sides of the high point. Right, and you're like, oh, can't go anywhere now. I'm in a 4x4, still can't go anywhere because I'm high pointed. Right? Well, what happens when you low point and you don't have wheels, but rather you have a flat surface and you low point? The middle buckles. The stress on the mid, there's too much weight on the center of it. If it's held up on both ends, you got a wave that comes across like this, and it peaks on both ends with a big valley hundreds of feet below them. That ship would just snap in half. No matter how strong the wood was, no matter how strong the pitch was, that long of a ship would snap in half. And so, gotcha. This ship would never sail. This ship couldn't navigate the waters. And my answer to that is, well, where are they going? The only reason that you would crest a wave like that to go against the wave when modern ship captains navigate the oceans, in order to not get smashed on the side with waves, they're taught to turn into the wave so that the point of the ship can cut through the wave to make it a less bumpy ride. Noah wasn't steering this ship. There was no rudder. There was no helm on this ship. This thing was getting tossed about by waves. The waves would hit, and as the waves are coming, the ship would naturally turn to the side and get moved with the waves. It didn't have to high point the waves. Waves don't usually make 90-degree turns. Waves are long, straight lines. And they would just be pushed by those waves. No matter how big those waves were, the waves could come up and smash over the entire top of it. But because it's basically airtight, that thing's not going anywhere. And it's not going to roll because it's exactly what it needs to be, width versus height. It's not going to tip. And so it's just going to go whoosh, whoosh. It's just going to keep pushing. Right? There's nothing that's going to high point it, and so it's built for stability. It's built to withstand the waves. The dimensions are perfect for keeping that thing afloat. Because if the object is just keep it floating for a year, that could do it. That would do it real well. All right. So stability. strength. But most of all, it was built for capacity. Oh, come on. There we go. It was built for capacity. This thing was huge. God told him to put 3 decks on the thing. If it was 51 feet high, 30 cubits, each floor was about 15 feet tall. So nice high ceilings. All right, lots of room in there. There was enough room if you have 3 decks. I think I have later on, I think I put the number of sized sheep you could put on there. Let's see if I have it on here. Yeah, we'll get to that. But we'll talk, because we're also going to talk about the kind of animals that they put on there. Yeah.
How many feet tall?
It was 51 feet tall, according to my numbers, according to their numbers. Okay. Which is roughly the size of a 5-story building. Okay, roughly the size of a 5-story building. If you've ever been to St. Louis, the arch is about 65 feet tall. So just slightly taller than this. Okay. All right. Construction of the ark. Some have said, well, Noah wasn't a shipbuilder. How would he have gotten the know-how to do so? Well, I mean, God gave him the blueprints. And by the way, he had a bunch of years to put this thing together, depending on how you read Genesis 6. When God says that the age of man, or that the time for man will be 120 years, I think that's how long Noah had to build the ark. 120 years is a long time to put something together. All right, to build something this big. So it was definitely Noah and his sons. There's no problem whatsoever of Noah hiring people, hiring servants, hiring whole teams of people to build this thing. Doesn't mean that they were faithful. It doesn't mean that they were people who were believing. It doesn't mean that they were people that were going to get on the boat. But they were just hired to do a job. So it wasn't just Noah and his 3 sons that built this thing. They could have easily had teams of people building with them. You say, how did the ancients have that much know-how? How did they know how to do it? Okay, go back and read Genesis 5, the chapter before this, and you'll find that they're already working with iron and steel, well before the Iron Age. They actually ended up losing that information because it all bottlenecks down through Noah. Noah himself probably didn't know how to work with steel, and so that was lost to the world. Okay, they're already working with metal even before Noah. By the way, let's go through this a little bit. There's roughly 1,500 years. I think it's like 1,350 years between creation and the flood. Okay. During that time, Adam lived about 930 years. Adam lived 130 years before Seth was born. So about 800 years after Seth. Remember, Cain and Abel were the first 2 sons born, but then Seth was born after Cain killed Abel. All right, so Cain kills Abel, and then it says, and then Adam went into his wife again and had a son to replace Abel. So Seth was born specifically to replace Abel. So now Seth is born. That's 130 years difference between Adam and Eve coming out of the garden, immediately starting to have children. They have Abel and then Cain. 130 years later, Cain kills Abel. All right? Cain didn't kill Abel as soon as they came out of the garden. They weren't young men. They were at least 130 years old, or almost 130 years old. That's pretty old. I mean, so they're going to live until, if Adam's living until he's 930, I mean, that's kind of adolescence still, I guess. But 130 years old, 130 years is a long time for the world to have propagated itself. remember, the only command that Adam and Eve had as they came out of the garden, you know what it was? Say it again. Say it louder. That's the only command they had. That's it. That's your entire life, man. Survive and make babies. Okay. I think we can do that, God. They didn't have to go to church. They didn't have to, they didn't have to fix the washing machine, right? They didn't have Xboxes to distract them, right? All they had to do was survive, plant a garden, plant some food, survive, and make babies for 130 years until Seth. So when Cain, where did Cain get his wife? I don't know. Probably picked some of the couple of thousand women that had been born in that time, because it only takes about 12 years for a human woman to be able to have a baby. If you take away all of our modern taboos, why are those modern taboos there? Okay, things like you can't marry a close relative, right? Where'd that come from? Anybody know where that came from? We can't marry a close relative? Say it again. It's in Leviticus. When was Leviticus written in comparison to Genesis? It's after, right? It's after. Leviticus hadn't been written yet. And it's pretty well assumed that whatever first humans there were probably had to marry their sisters. By the way, that's an evolutionary model too, right? You got Neanderthals running around in their model, and those Neanderthals have little hairless babies with big old heads, right? And they're like, oh, that is one ugly baby. It's like a naked, furless, big-headed thing that doesn't crawl on anything. It just walks everywhere. We're going to need to find it another one of those. Where are we going to find that? I don't know. We probably better have more kids. Because we're the only people who have the genetic information. By the way, we can prove scientifically, we can prove that every human being shares the same mom. That has been proven scientifically. You guys remember that mitochondria? What is the mitochondria? What is the mitochondria? It's the powerhouse of the cell. Where'd that mitochondria come from? We can prove scientifically that all human beings got their mitochondria from what they call mitochondrial Eve. They actually call that person Eve. Every human being came from the same woman, scientifically speaking. So if anybody says, well, where'd King get his wife? You say, well, I don't know. Where'd any human being get their wife? We're all related. We all come from the same parents. All right, figure it out. Don't be a kid. Don't be a middle schooler about it. Yeah.
I think that everyone would think their argument about that would be like it's contradicting like the thought of like, but the thing is like God only made that rule later on.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't contradicting his nature because there's nothing wrong with it. There wasn't
That's right.
like inbred.
That's right.
That wasn't going to be a problem back then because
Right.
of the genetic pool. So
Exactly, because that right. You just hit the nail on the head. Because the reason why you can't marry a close relative is because of genetics. Because every strand of DNA that is in every single one of us, because we have been making copies of copies of copies of copies of copies for hundreds of generations, because we've been doing that, we all have errors in our DNA. We have markers that are missing or just not there. We're missing stuff in our DNA. If you marry and procreate with a close relative, then it's most likely that those errors will match up with those errors, and you will have a child with Down syndrome. You'll have a child with other genetic diseases. And so the answer is diversification of the gene pool. The answer is to marry people that are not like your family. We saw this as a really big problem back in the day. Royalty had this problem a lot because you have to marry someone from a royal line. Well, the only royal line is our royal line. And so that, like the Habsburgs of Austria-Hungary, the Habsburg dynasty looked like, the Habsburg family tree looked like a pole. And by the time you got down to the last of the Habsburgs, he has what's called the Habsburg chin, and the dude looks just like freakish. Why? Because they're all interbreeding. But if you have all of the genetic information for the entire human race all wrapped up in your DNA, and every child that you have could come out as a different color, think about that. I never thought that was a possibility. I thought, well, how is it that you have white kids and black kids and eventually you end up with this? Most likely, by the way, Noah's 3 kids, his 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. It's very likely that they had 3 different colored kids, all biological. Ham was the father of the African peoples, and so Ham was black. Shem was the father of the Middle Eastern people groups, and so he was brown. And then Japheth was the father of the European and Asiatic peoples and what would eventually then be Native American peoples, right? By the way, Native Americans and Europeans are much more closely related than we are to anything else. Or at least more closely related than we are to African people groups. Okay, here's the deal: that Japheth was probably white or Asian skinned, right? They had 3 kids, 3 boys, all with 3 different colors. By the way, have you ever seen? So at first when I was a kid, I remember being like, "That's weird. That's so crazy. I don't know how did they do that?" And then my best friend had a chocolate lab. Anybody have a chocolate lab here? Anybody Labrador people like just? Oh, I love chocolate labs. Chocolate labs are the dumbest dog ever built. They're missing a few brain cells. They are loyal. They are friendly. They want to be around you. But man, they are dumb. But what's really cool is, okay, a chocolate lab has the dominant brown fur gene, but can have, and many times does have, all of the recessive traits for both yellow labs and black labs. Because the yellow lab is a recessive trait. And so I went to, my best friend's dog had puppies because they bred her. And she had puppies, and she had a litter of puppies, and we went to go see her. And I looked in there, and well, she got black babies and brown babies and yellow babies. Because she had all the genetic information for all of those 3 kinds. They were all in her DNA. It was possible. We're so used to genetic diversity so that, this people group, they wander off and they're all together and they only breed within themselves, right? And what God really, what the original thing was, and we don't even know about Adam and Eve. We know Noah and his 3 kids because we know the evidence of it. Who knows what color Cain or Abel or Seth were? What level of melanin they had in their skin? It didn't matter to them. Yeah.
I thought that was just like adaptation. Like the reason we have different races because like for example, the reason Asian people have squintier eyes is because it's so bright over there.
No, it is not. It is not. Some of that may be coincidental, but no. There is some possibility that in the initial leaving of the Tower of Babel, as people are dispersing, that the darker-skinned people were more comfortable in hotter climates, whereas the lighter-skinned people were more comfortable in colder climates. And so that what happened was you're getting the chicken before the egg, or the egg before the chicken. Okay, so the reason why is because the people who have those traits then migrate toward places that are more comfortable for them. So as they migrate toward places that are more comfortable for them, then yeah, you can maybe make some correlations, but be careful not making one-to-one correlations. Yeah.
So earlier
Right.
skin, but like,
Right.
but it can't like increase melatonin in like people.
So,
There's no way to like
right.
increase it, so there'd have to be like jet black.
No, not necessarily. So, so going back to my Labrador Retriever example, the chocolate lab is what's dominant, not the black. Both black and yellow labs are both recessive, and so a chocolate lab can have chocolate, black, or yellow labs. A black lab can only have black labs. A yellow lab can only have yellow labs. A yellow lab cannot have a chocolate lab because it's a recessive gene.
Wouldn't they have had to have a black lab up in their line before, or is that?
No. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, it would have to be in their genes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the higher one up the genetic scale was black. No. Yeah, because whenever you have that genetic tree or whatever, you have a dominant trait and then you have recessive traits, and and you can have all the recessive traits in your DNA that are there, but the dominant trait is what presents, right? And so in human beings, brown skin tone is actually what presents as the dominant gene. This is why, by the way, this is why Hitler was not only wrong, he was like counter true, right? Because one of the strongest DNAs, the DNA that is the strongest as far, and I say strong, by the way, don't think I'm saying strong as in like survival of fittest type strong. I'm talking about the dominant genes as compared to the recessive genes. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, white skin are all recessive genes. So to say that is the dominant race, no. That's the recessive race, guys. Sorry, it is. It's the recessive race. And so he was like counter right. He wasn't even wrong. He wasn't just wrong. He was counter right. Does that make sense? He was extra wrong. Right? What's that? Unfortunately, yeah. Right. For somebody who really likes blonde hair, blue-eyed people, you sure do have really dark hair and dark eyes. Anyway.
White people are just like a bunch of albinos.
Well, no, it's more the sense like we are the yellow labs of the human race, right? That's why like blonde hair, blue-eyed people can only have blonde hair, blue-eyed children because it's a recessive gene. All right. I mean, it is possible. I've met quite a few. It's possible for black people to have white babies. It is a very recessive gene, but it can be in that DNA. I've met a few. I had a really good friend who worked with him at Chick-fil-A when I was a teenager. Actually, I won't get into it. All right. Where was I going with that? Okay. Is that pre-flood, the human race coming out of Eden with Adam and Eve, and then, of course, Cain and Abel, and eventually Seth, and that it says, and they had other sons and daughters. Okay? They had other sons and daughters. We don't know how many the other sons and daughters were. But let's just take, for instance, if Adam and Eve, remember the only thing they have to do is have babies. It's their only job. That's what they were told to do. And unlike tending the garden and not eating the fruit, all right, don't be middle schoolers, but this job was more fun that God gave them. And of course they're going to do that. And so that's what they did. They proliferated. Telling me that I didn't think I had the sound on. I turned the sound off. No, that's all right. I just turned the sound off on my computer. No. I'm on mute. I'm on mute. Can't be me. Anyway, last time I checked, that command to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth was never lifted. That was never lifted. That's still a command of the human race. That we are commanded to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. All right, let's finish up a couple things here before we take a break. We talked about the What is happening here? No, I don't want to share it. Oh my goodness. I want to slideshow it. There we go. All right. Noah's generation would have had plenty of know-how for large construction. When we come back from break, we'll look at the animals that were on the ark and the global flood and probably get a little further than that. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a break. Yes.
Do you have any estimation on what the population pre-flood was?
So I was kind of getting to that, but I didn't end up getting there. If you take 1,300 years, divide it into generations of even 20 years, even if you have a very conservative 20, and each generation, if each family has a minimum of, I think it was 6 kids, I think it is. And that would be a very if they continue to have children all through life, then they could have easily had dozens of children from each generation. If you go with the conservative numbers, there could have easily been several million people on the earth. If you go with the more possible numbers, if you just go with the outer limit of what's possible, as in everybody's living 900 some odd years, everyone is as fertile as can be because their DNA, there's no genetic diseases, there's no problems, right? There's no diabetes, there's no fetal alcohol syndrome, there's no, you take all that stuff out, and God is allowing for birth rates, birth survival rates extremely high, right? Because in some of the ancient days, one of the biggest problems was infant mortality. Was actually the biggest problem was infant mortality. The reason why they say the life expectancy back in that day was only 40 years old as compared to 70. No, life expectancy was still 70, but the average, once you average in all of the infant mortality, was only about 40. Because there's so many people that died when they were babies. So, but if you take all that into consideration, I think the upper limit, I think I calculated one time, somewhere around 10 billion. Now, I don't think it was that. But you're talking about anywhere from several million to upwards of billions of people on the planet.
I know it'd be complicated.
The equation itself gets rather complicated because you have some variables that the conservative end is way down here and the more liberal end is way up here. So
I was thinking if you can have a child per year, right? So then Adam and Eve had upwards of 900 children.
Easily, if they continue to have children all through life.
Of those 900 children,
Yeah.
you can go down to 100 generations.
Right.
So if you take
Right.
900 to the 100th power,
Right.
that's kind of close to the potential, and that was one with 320 zeros behind it. And it's I don't think
I don't think it was that. I don't think it was quite that. But yeah, I think I calculated at one time that the upward limit is probably somewhere around 10 billion, which we're getting close to today.
Yeah, and it's
It would, and it would definitely be a ironic, I would say, that if the world ticks up to 10 billion, and that's when the Lord, does another wiping the slate clean. It's so I guess that's the upward limit of how many people can be on the planet at all. But yeah, and which would have been then if all of these people are not limited by any kind of. I'm probably talking through the microphone here. Just realized that. All right. Let's go ahead and come back together. I think most everybody's in here. If we can get started, because that way I want to finish up a couple of thoughts on Noah's Ark before we get to our next topic. Kind of went off Kind of went off script a little bit on that last one, but I think that was good. It was a lot of good discussion, able to answer some questions there. Let's talk a little about the animals that went on the ark. I think we've talked about this a little bit in other areas. First of all, how did they gather the animals on the ark? How did Noah round up all those animals? He didn't. The Bible says very clearly, Genesis 6:20, God was the one who gathered the animals. And we see all throughout Scripture that animals are capable of hearing and obeying the voice of God. We actually see that happen all throughout Scripture. We know that Balaam's donkey, right, actually literally talked because it was given the ability to do so by God. We have the one I'm always fascinated about is when the Philistines take the Ark of the Covenant, and they put it in their temple, and then overnight the statue like falls down in front of it like it's bowing down to the Ark. And they're like, we got to get this thing out of here. And they've got the boils, and they got the rats, and they got all these things. And so they take it back, and they send it back to Israel. And these are pagans. These are people who know nothing about the one true God, other than that's Israel's God. And they do this really weird thing, okay? They take it, and it says that they hook up an oxen to this cart. They put it up on a cart, and they hook up an oxen to it, a female oxen. It says that it had never been hitched, and that it had just given birth. Like a female oxen that had just given birth. And then it says they hitched it up, and then this oxen then starts moving toward Israel, and it says lowing as she went. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been around cows before. If you hear a cow that has been separated from its calf, it is one of the most heartbreaking sounds you'll ever hear. They get really upset when they get separated from their calves. Moose do the same thing. That's why the cow bull names are used. And so this cow that had just had a child, had a calf, walked away from its calf to take the ark back to Israel. So we see all throughout Scripture animals doing God's work, doing God's bidding. And so God bringing the animals together, not a big problem. Not a big problem that the animals are obeying God. And so when he says gather 2 of every kind of animal, all right, and so we have that they migrate. In other words, they all just kind of got this migratory sense to come toward wherever it was Noah was with the ark. Let's get it. Go ahead. Were there dinosaurs on the ark? Well, how did Noah get all those big old dinosaurs on the ark? Well, the answer is he didn't get those big old dinosaurs on the ark. He got the little dinosaurs on the ark. Right? Why would you take the big ones? By the way, Noah didn't take any big animals with him. Most likely, he took adolescents with him. He took animals. By the way, the most optimal time for an animal to come, it would have to be able to come to Noah on its own free will, so it would have to be able to separate from its parent, right? So whatever age that animal was, able to separate from their parent, but in that kind of that zone of not necessarily being able to procreate yet. They're still young enough that they're sleeping a lot. But they're old enough that when they come off the ark, it would be ridiculously stupid for Noah to put an old animal on the ark, because as soon as you come up off the ark, that animal is going to die within a few years or within a few months. You want young, vibrant, vital animals that would then live for years or a long period of time, but you also don't want them procreating during the year that they're on the ark, right? Because now all of a sudden, instead of just 2 rabbits on the ark, you have 1,000 rabbits on the ark. Now you got to deal with all the rabbits on the ark. All right? By the way, I tell you what, if you want to see an animated Noah's Ark that I think is actually very accurate, very accurate. I'm not going to say that it is 100%. I'm not saying that they were going for accuracy, but an animated one that is very accurate, surprisingly accurate. It's Disney's Fantasia 2000 starring Donald Duck as Noah. It is fantastic. It is incredible how well they depicted the size of the ark, how well they depicted the animals coming on of their own free will, how it depicts the people laughing at Noah. It depicts there's so much good stuff. Actually, I take that back. No, Donald Duck was not depicted as Noah. Donald Duck was like just a servant on the ark somehow. Not sure how that worked because there were also ducks on the ark, like real ducks. In fact, he actually like makes a point of it. He like looks at him, he's like, as the ducks go on the ark. But yeah, and at the very end, they're all getting off of the ark. And as they're getting off of the ark, the two bunnies that had come onto the ark, they're getting off of the ark. And all of a sudden, there's like the two bunnies go off of the ark with like 100 bunnies going after them, coming off the ark. But yeah, you don't want the animals to be procreating. You also don't want, and very likely a lot of them would have hibernated. Getting back to dinosaurs then. Getting back to dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, as a type of animal, dinosaurs are reptiles. Okay, dinosaurs are reptiles. They're not chickens. They're not birds. They're reptiles. Okay, now there are different kinds of dinosaurs. There are raptor-type dinosaurs. We'll talk about dinosaurs tomorrow. But just as far as talking about them on the ark, dinosaurs are reptiles. Reptiles, a feature of all reptiles have this feature, that reptiles grow until they die. They never stop growing. They don't have that feature where they reach adulthood and stop growing. They continue to grow until they die. That's why you have giant sea turtles. You know, Finding Nemo, right? How old are you? I'm 150 years old, man. Right? Giant sea turtles. That can live over 100 years. They're reptiles, and they live that long. And they keep growing. Tortoises. You go to the zoo, and there's this tortoise is like 200 years old. This tortoise is there, and it's like as big as this table. Right? Anacondas in South America. And it's like, man, there's a 50-foot anaconda. Man, it was huge. Yeah, that thing was also about 80 years old. All right? Crocodiles. Some of the biggest crocodiles ever seen are very old. All right? We have giant reptiles today because as long as they can keep growing, they continue to get bigger. Like I said, snakes, turtles, tortoises, alligators, crocodiles. All right, reptiles continue to grow until they die. Dinosaurs were no different. Dinosaurs grew until they died, which means all of those massively huge dinosaurs that we see in the fossil record were all very old. In fact, we actually know this because many of the T-Rexes that have been found. T-Rex is one of the largest predatory animals that we see in the fossil record, or one of the largest predatory dinosaurs, carnivores, in the fossil record. And man, that thing is massive. That thing is huge, right? Was also very old. In fact, we can actually see in the bone structure that many of those large T-Rexes had arthritis, right? And in fact, a lot of people believe that the larger T-Rexes, they weren't hunters, they were scavengers. So the whole like Jurassic Park being chased by a T-Rex probably didn't happen. And not only that, but as they're driving away in the Jeep and the T-Rex is chasing them, T-Rex would never chase them. Because number one, he was a scavenger, not a predator. And number two, that large of a T-Rex, that old of a T-Rex, the way that its hind legs were spread apart probably would have waddled a little bit. And so it would have been like would have had a hard time even going that fast, would not have been able to keep up with that Jeep at all. And on top of which, those little bitty arms can't do anything. Yeah.
So then, like, the dinosaurs not die naturally, like, through, like, disease and stuff?
Well, what I'm saying is that, so like Adam lived to be 930. How old did the dinosaur? If the atmosphere and the genetics and all the conditions surrounding Adam allowed him to live to 930, how long did the reptiles get to live? You're going to have massive reptiles.
So I was just thinking, like, does that mean that, like, the reptiles could get bigger than they can get now?
Yes. Yeah, they would have gotten bigger than but the ones that got on the ark, though, you don't put the big ones on the ark. You don't put the old ones on the ark. You put the little ones on the ark. So yeah, there probably was a baby T-Rex on the ark. There probably was a baby a velociraptor on the ark. Right? Probably even a baby brachiosaurus. Those things are huge. But the babies aren't, right? You ever seen Land Before Time? Littlefoot's tiny. Right? So yeah, you could have put plenty on the ark, but as they come up off of the ark, wherever they migrated to, wherever they ended up going, they didn't last very long. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll talk about dinosaurs and what I think happened to them after the flood. We're just talking about getting them onto the ark today. Okay, so yes, dinosaurs were on the ark. And by the way, one of the reasons I feel very strongly about this, and I will give you a little bit of insight into me. I want to say 8 years old. I couldn't have been older than 9. So we're talking first, second grade. In Sunday school. Went to a fairly decent-sized church. Sunday school was kind of big. And I was that little know-it-all kid, right? I was that kid that knew all the answers to all the questions or whatever, because I knew that all I had to do was say Jesus, and I got the answer right? Because that's Sunday school. But teacher was talking about Noah's Ark one day. I have the distinction at Christian Fellowship Church in Evansville, Indiana, as having been the only child in the Sunday school program to ever be spanked by the Sunday school superintendent. Because it was my dad. Because I was causing trouble in class. The reason I was causing trouble in class, and I will defend it to this day, vehemently, was because I asked the teacher, what about the dinosaurs? She was teaching Noah's Ark. I said, well, what about the dinosaurs? She didn't have an answer. She couldn't answer me. She said, and so she shushed me. Shush. It's not that important. You don't need to worry about it. Stop asking questions. But what about I need to know. What about the dinosaurs? How did the dinosaurs were they on the boat? Were they there? Shush, shush, be quiet. You're bothering me, kid. Stop asking questions. And evidently she got so upset that she sent me to the Sunday school superintendent, told my dad that I had been disrupting class, and I got a spanking. I mean, my dad was right because I was probably being obnoxious about it. Right? I probably wasn't exactly being, my debate skills probably weren't exactly, on par with Cicero. But I was a little punk kid. I knew all the answers, but I didn't know that answer, and the teacher evidently didn't know that answer either. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kids running around in our Sunday schools that are asking questions like, "What about the dinosaurs?" And we have Sunday school teachers who don't have answers. Like, yeah, they were on the ark. The little ones were on the ark. They weren't big ones, they were little ones. The babies weren't on the ark. Remember Littlefoot? Yeah, Littlefoot. Littlefoot was on the ark. Don't worry about it. Oh, cool. All right. I probably would have just fine if that teacher had answers. All right. Where'd my clicker go? Oh, I set my clicker down. There we go. All right. So yes, there were dinosaurs on the ark. They were created on day 6 with all the other land animals. The fossil record and legends suggest survival after the flood. We'll talk about that when we talk about dinosaurs tomorrow. Again, likely the juveniles were taken rather than large, the large old ones. All right, so there's the question then, how many animals needed to be on the ark? Okay, we know that there were 2 of every kind. We know that there were at least 7 pairs of the clean animals. Now, we don't know what constituted a clean animal to Noah. Now, it's very likely that that was something that Moses, because Moses would have known what the clean animals were, because Moses had been given the law, and Moses had been given the prohibition to not eat the non-clean animals, and he was given all of the specs on what a clean animal was, right? Chews the cud, doesn't divide the hoof, that type of thing. I don't know how Noah knew which clean animals were, but I don't think Noah needed to know because the animals just showed up. He didn't have to round them up. He didn't have to worry. He just said, take these animals on, and they went on. And by the way, the clean animals were not there for food. Clean animals were there for sacrifices. Now, we don't know that they made any sacrifices while they were on the boat, but as soon as they got off of the boat, Noah made sacrifices. Would be pretty dumb if we didn't have the information that they were to take 7 of every clean animal, and all we had was Noah coming off of the boat and making a sacrifice. They were like, well, there's one less species of animal. Good job, Noah. You saved him all the way through the flood just to sacrifice that one kind of animal. I guess we don't have that kind of animal anymore. No, there were 7 so that Noah could sacrifice, so could make blood sacrifices after the flood, and they would be perpetuated faster than the wild animals or the unclean animals. All right, but of the animals, remember we've said this all along. He did not take one of every species of animal. Didn't take one of every species of animal, but rather he took one of every kind of animal. The kind, it varies because you have to understand, we talked about this a little bit, that taxonomy today is based almost entirely on comparative anatomy. Right? These animals have this kind of legs and this kind of hoofs, and they have this kind of antlers, and they have this kind of noses. And so we lump them together because they have similar features. But the way that, number one, they were created, and number two, how they were categorized as far as kinds, the best way I can describe it is what Scripture says is that when He made them after their own kind, He made them with the ability to procreate after their kind. That's what He says, that they would procreate after their kind. And so the basic definition of a kind is the ability to procreate within that kind. So this kind of animal has that kind of animal. And you can then have genetic variation. Now, it's possible that those have since diversified so much that the ability to continue to procreate has stopped. All right, but earlier up the line, they did have the ability to procreate. They do have the same genetic information, and so better, instead of going with the comparative analogy or comparative anatomy, is to go with the DNA. What does the DNA say? And that's actually a lot easier to put animals together in groups, and you can see these animals with this DNA. They are yes, they have all these markers for these other things, but they all can procreate after that kind. All right, it's all about genetic information. And because of that, we talked about the dog kind. You don't have to take Saint Bernards and Chihuahuas and wolves and foxes and what did I say? Labrador retrievers and poodles, and you don't have to take all that. You just take two dogs. Same thing with cats. Same thing, and most likely you had a dog that was similar to a wolf. You had cats probably similar to a lynx. All right, maybe basically a medium-sized predatory cat that would then be bred to be smaller and less aggressive and more docile to be a house cat, but also could have had procreated to have larger genes that would then So the question was before about like skin color and light skin, dark skin, medium skin. When you have the way that the genetics would work, or usually works, is that the medium is usually what presents itself in the dominant genes. So like it's not black skin or white skin, but rather the brown skin that's the dominant color. With dog size, small dog, large dog, the medium-sized dog is usually the dominant gene. The medium-sized dog is the dominant gene. Same thing with cats, same thing with other things. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be able to tell you exactly what animals are related. That's not my area of study. But what I'm told is that these experts have put their brains together and have come up with, out of not just the animals that we have that are extant today, but also the extinct animals, but extant meaning existing, and also the extinct animals. You have to account for all of those. When you account for both extant and extinct animals, you end up with about 1,400 kinds. Remember, they're adolescent animals, and so even the largest of animals, elephants, giraffes, the rhinoceroses, hippopotami, all right? All of those kinds of animals would have been smaller because the adolescents of those species are smaller. And if you account for all of that, by the way, quite a few of these would have been insects. Quite a few of these would have been, as long as they are land-dwelling, breathing animals, which does include some insects. It does include some creeping things, not all of them. A lot of them don't breathe. A lot of them don't live on land. Okay? A lot of them can fly around. And so you have basically all the birds and all the land animals. All right? You count all of those, about 1,400. The ark would have needed about 7,000 individual animals, plenty of space on that size of an ark. If you give them, I think the standard, if you're shipping animals, you need 1 cubic yard of space per animal, but for an actual enclosure that they would not then go crazy, because you can only do that for so long. If you're shipping an animal, you only need so much space. But if you're going to have them for a year and they're supposed to be there for a long time, you need a little bit larger space, but it's not huge. So each enclosure really only needed be about 2 by 2 by 2 yards. So 6 feet wide, 6 feet wide, 6 feet wide. If you do that, you've got plenty of space on the ark for 7,000 animals. And remember, there's 3 decks that are football and a half field long, football field and a half long. All right. So remember, there's only land-dwelling animals. I keep setting my clicker down. Why do I keep setting my clicker down? Stop it. All right. Only land-dwelling, air-breathing animals. And there's plenty of space then for animals, for grains that could be then used as feed. They would have probably spent a lot of time while they were making the ark. They probably would have spent a lot of time gathering feed, gathering food in storehouses that would then be able to be put on the ark to be able to feed themselves and the animals. Remember, they're all vegetarians at this point. Nothing is meat eating. Okay, so they don't have to worry about predators that are going to tear into one another. There is a question as to whether or not they needed potable water. I don't think they did. I think they could have easily had a rudimentary filtration system to get water from off of the ark, from just the water that's outside. All you need is a basic filter that can filter out all the gunk that would be floating in the water. But then you say, well, yeah, but wouldn't that all be salt water? And the answer would be, I don't think so. Because the seas are salty now, but they probably were not salty before the flood. I think salt water, seas, are a result of the flood, not something that was before the flood. Now, toward the end, it's possible that the seas would have been a little more salty. But I think there's plenty of water that could be had that was not salty. And remember, salt water and regular water, or freshwater, salt water don't mix as well, and various temperatures of water don't mix very well. And so they could have easily always been around fresh water. Yeah.
Concerning the concept that everything was vegetarian before the flood, what is that like? How do the fossils we have of dinosaurs with tooth marks and stuff?
Okay, so yeah, probably. Well, I shouldn't say that. The people were vegetarians. I apologize. Yeah, you are correct. It was just the people that were vegetarians. It's not until they get off the flood that the people are. Thank you for that. Should have been more clear with that. You do have but when they were created, though, they were all created vegetarians. Yeah, but you're right. There were predators. We see the carnivore dinosaurs that would have been caught in the flood. All right. All right. So care for the animals. They would have had to. They probably would have. A lot of them would have been in hibernation. Okay. He would have given them drives and instincts to be subdued. We know that the females could have been nesting, where they hole up, kind of put themselves in one area where they're not bothering other animals. And again, they could have all survived on the grains. Even carnivores can survive on grains. So even if you took carnivores on board, you don't have to be feeding them the carnivore diet. And by the way, most carnivores also can sleep for long periods of time. If you feed them before they get on, get a nice good meal, they could last for a while, although not an entire year. All right. Genesis 6:21 says that Noah had the responsibility of caring for those animals. So he had a full year of that was his job. He and his sons, they spent a full year just caring for the animals, making sure that the animals had food, making sure that they were not getting squirrely in their cages, that type of thing. All right, he was a little bit of a zookeeper. Possible systems you could have. You could easily have systems on board the boat that would make it easier to feed and water the animals. It's very possible. I think it's very possible that he had essentially what we would call today a hydroponics bay, where he had a place where he could grow food on the ark itself. Have that somewhere on that top level where the windows are, where the sunlight could come in. If obviously after the rains had stopped, right after the 40 days, then they would have started having sunshine. Would have been able to get sunshine in there to grow food. Okay, so yeah, all of that is very, very possible. Okay, let's go forward here. I'm going to the global flood itself. We'll talk about this. We know that the water, if every cloud that is currently in the stratosphere of Earth just let go of all of its moisture right now, like just right now. First of all, it would not rain 40 days. It would not take that long for all the clouds to just empty out. If it's just the clouds emptying out, you don't have 40 days of rain. 2, if they all emptied out, right now with today's topography of the world, you would have there would be some places that would flood, but a lot of places wouldn't flood. A lot of places the seas would probably rise just a few inches or maybe a couple of feet. You don't have that much water in the clouds at any given time. Most of the water on Earth is in the oceans. In fact, the vast majority of water is in the oceans. So there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind when talking about the waters prevailing over the whole Earth, covering every high mountain. First of all, the mountains weren't as big as they were, and the oceans were not as deep as they are. That's a huge, big difference. We'll talk about, I think the next thing I want to get into is plate tectonics. If you want to go there, I think that's a really good one to get into. And that is that the Earth didn't have plates like it does today. Before the flood, those plates are a product of the flood. When the fountains of the deep broke open, the crust of the earth cracked. And so you have now the oceans are deep crevices that are sometimes as much as 2 miles, 6 miles deep, whatever it is. And you have mountains that have been smashed up and smashed together and form now that are several miles, I think 3-4 miles. What is Everest? Everest is 20,000 feet. Is it 4 miles? A little under 4 miles. All right, it's a lot. If you lower the highest mountains and raise the lowest depths of the seas, you have plenty of water to cover the earth. All right. I'm not saying that there weren't mountains or that there weren't large bodies of water on the earth. That I think there was, but they weren't nearly as massive as they are today. All right. So if you have that, you can easily cover the world, and of course all the water from the water table, all of the water, basically you take all the water on Earth and put it on the surface of the Earth, it'll work. It works pretty easily. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip down here to could the ark survive the flood? Could the ark have survived the flood? The basic answer is yes. The ark proportions were tested by a group in South Korea called the Chryso study in 1992. They determined that the ark, as it was built, they put it through computer models with stress test, with fluid dynamics, tested it. It could have withstood waves up to 98 feet, which is about twice the height of the boat itself. In fact, they determined that the dimensions are near optimal for stability, strength, and even comfort on that boat. The ark design features, there are some things. So there's a couple of things that they could have done. They would have had the technology to do to make for the ark to be more comfortable. Although they don't have to have done this, they could have created the hull, in other words, the bottom of the boat, if it had a little bit of a shape to it, would have been able to move through the waves a little bit better and been a lot more stable, okay, in the water. If it had a flat bottom, it would have had a harder time being stable on the water, so it's very possible that that God had them put a bit of a keel on that boat. I think the windows themselves are an incredibly important feature. To have the row of windows that God told to put around the top of the ark are incredibly important. And a lot of that has to do with air circulation. Right? God didn't seal them into the boat. If they had been sealed in, they would have all suffocated, they would all have died, or they would have just had a really hard time with just the smell of all of, and by the way, most of their job wasn't feeding the animals, most of their job was probably cleaning up after the animals. Right? A lot of shoveling a lot of manure is what they would have done. Now, of course, that they could just dumped overboard. They didn't have to, it's like a modern day thing. They got to keep that in a thing. You can't just throw that in the ocean. Like they don't care. They're just tossing it in the water. But one feature that possibly could have been on there, I'm not going to say that it was, but an ancient ship could have had what's called a moon pool. A moon pool is a hole in the middle of the boat. You say, why on earth would you put a hole in the middle of the boat? Well, it's a hole, but it's a hole that has walls. And the walls could have easily gone up to maybe the second level, okay? And so the Archimedes principle as the displacement of the water and the water level on the outside of the boat, as long as that wall was above where the displacement was, then you would have had a pool in the middle where the water was. Now, as the water then moves around the boat, that water would then move up and down. As that water moves up and down, it becomes a piston that would push air through the boat and would circulate air through the boat out those windows. And so you wouldn't have the stench of all of the animals' feces. So I mean, there's a possible way. I'm not going to say that's what they did. I don't think. I'm fairly certain they don't have that feature on Ken Ham's boat in Kentucky. Do they have a moon pool there? They talk about moon pools. Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's a very possible feature that they could have had. There's lots of other features we could talk about, ballasts and whatnot. Contrast this with other flood legends of the day. Those ships, Gilgamesh's ship was a cube. It would have not made it. All right, if Gilgamesh was a real hero, Gilgamesh would have been finding himself, out of luck. Probably would have made it maybe the first couple of months. Maybe he could have made it a while, but there's other ones that have a raft. I forget which one it is that has the raft idea. And by the way, it's very possible that as human beings were trying to stay alive, the reason why the flood lasted a full year was to make sure that all of them died. It very well could have been that some of them survived floating around on debris, floating on rafts, floating around on whatever else they could find for days, weeks, months. But eventually, after a full year, they would have lost food, they would have starved, they would have had no protection from the elements, right? Okay. So yes, the ark certainly could have survived. Where are we here? Yeah, the ark certainly could have survived. We talked about the fountains of the deep. All right, let's... All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that there, and we'll go on to another subject. You guys cool with that? Yeah, you guys got all the ark stuff you want? Any other questions you had about the ark? Because I don't want to leave that topic without you guys saying, I think I've got it all figured out. Yeah.
You think they just scrapped all the wood when they were done with it?
So yeah,
Gone out of Dodge.
I think they did. I think that they, because once they got off of the boat and all the animals come off the boat, they would have needed shelter right away. And it's very likely they would have continued to live in the ark until they could build for themselves more permanent shelters. We do know that they did. We know he planted a vineyard. We know that they settled, and so and we know through history that they began migrating fairly quickly away from the mountains of Ararat, and so the rest of it would have just been abandoned. Now, did any of that wood petrify? That's the question. If it didn't petrify, it was just sitting there, it would have just rotted away, and we would have no evidence of it. All that wood would eventually, over 6,000 years, would have just withered away and rotted and would be gone. If any of it petrified, you could potentially have, and I have a picture of it here again, possibility of what's called the Ararat anomaly. On Mount Ararat itself in Turkey, there is this ridge that looks eerily similar to the keel of a boat. I don't know. I don't know if that's it or not. I mean, what's that?
How big is it?
It's roughly the right size. It's roughly the right size.
It seems like they would have just taken all the...
Yeah.
That's a lot of wood, especially if you didn't have many trees.
Yeah. What's really interesting about this is that when I first taught this back in early 2000s, it was all more mythological. Like there was this hey, did you know that this was a thing? And it was like, oh yeah, this guy, this story of it or this story of it. These really high-res images are very, very recent. And no, it's really there. By the way, most of the time, this is under snow. This is taken in the summer. This is mostly snow. All right. Any other questions? Any statements? Anything that you guys wanted to, maybe you know already or you have in your knowledge base that you'd like to share? Yeah.
This is a question, but I don't know your full stance on like Nephilim and that Enoch stuff, related things. But I know that doesn't it say with Goliath that he was a descendant of Nephilim?
Okay, Nephilim. Nephilim.
It was pre-flood, right?
Yeah, so let's talk Nephilim just for very briefly, since it is Genesis 6. It is related to the flood. We'll talk about it for a second here. Turn, if you have your Bible, to Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. We're going to do this as a normal Bible study methods. We're going to take this as Scripture says. We're going to look at the context. We're going to look at what does the Bible say, not what we think it says, not what we want it to say. What does the Bible say? Okay? Now, chapter 6, verse 1. Now it came to pass when men, what does that mean? What does men mean? Human beings, right? Human beings. That's pretty obvious. When men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. So who are the daughters of men? Anybody? Born to human beings. Because it says that the men, right? And daughters were born to them. So men proliferated on the earth, and there were daughters born to them. So mankind, human beings, proliferated on the earth, and daughters were born to them. You can't get any clearer than that. It's right there in the verse. So the daughters of men are who? Human women. That the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, that they were beautiful. Now, who are the sons of God? Now, we don't have any context. That's not in the context here. We do have an interesting context that's in a similar, written by the same author, written about the same period, came from a similar oral source that was then written down by the same author. That's Moses. Book of Job, chapter 1. Who is it that comes before God? What's that? Sons of God. So in context, in that context there, sons of God are what? Angels. Angelic beings. Say it again. Which include both angels and demons. Remember, angels and demons are both of the same kind. They're both angelic beings. Demons are just simply fallen angels. Okay? Just like orcs used to be elves. All right, they saw that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. What does it mean to take a wife for yourself? To be married, to have physical relations, to be in a relationship with. They took wives for themselves. Now there's a caveat here. It says the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years old." It is this ensuing event, this particular event, that sets the time, or sets the point when God says, "That's enough, I'm going to give him 120 more years." That 120 years is not how long human beings live. It's that 120 years is how much time from this event, the sons of God taking daughters of men as wives, until the flood. It's 120 years. Okay, so God had determined that there would be 120 years before the flood would come. And notice it is because man is what? Flesh. Because man is a fleshly creature. Man goes after the desires of his flesh. So this is a physical thing that's being done. It's not a spiritual thing that's being done. He's not punishing them because they're doing something spiritually wrong. He's punishing them because they're doing something physically wrong, their flesh. Verse 4. This is where people start getting confused. It says in verse 4, and depending on your translation, it says, there were giants on the earth in those days. I'm going to stop right there. What does that tell you? What's that? That there were giants in the land in those days. That's a point of interest. Moses is telling us in those days there were giants. That has nothing to do with the story itself. That's just simply a timestamp. That's just telling us that there were giants in the land. And then he says, and there were also what? And also afterward. So the giants, that's the Hebrew word, there's Nephilim, is just a point of curiosity that Moses gives us. Yeah, there were Nephilim then, and there's Nephilim today. So if there are Nephilim then, and there are Nephilim today, or at least in Moses' day, by the time he's writing this, if he says there was then and there are now afterward, and by the way, when they went into the land, what did they find? Giants. They fought giants. Caleb fought giants. They're fighting giants all the way until you get to David. David's fighting giants, not just Goliath, but Goliath's brothers, all described as Nephilim. Actually, I think there's like 2 or 3 different words that also mean giant, and they're usually pretty much interchangeably. Okay, so what are they? What are they? What was Goliath? Was he a different kind of being? Or was he human? Was Goliath a human being that just happened to be very tall? Or was he a different kind of being? If the Nephilim are a different kind of being than human beings, that means that in order for them to have existed prior to the flood and after the flood, what does that entail? They have to be on the boat. It's the only thing that survives that's a land-dwelling, air-breathing animal to go from before the flood to after the flood. They have to be on the boat. They can't have been destroyed in the flood because they survive afterwards. They exist afterwards. So what are the Nephilim? They are giants. Giantism is a genetic mutation. We still have it today. There are still giants. There's still such a thing as giants, just as much as there are such a thing as dwarfs and midgets and pygmies, people that are very, very small, people that are very, very tall. Right? Does anybody know who the tallest man of recent record is? What's that? His name was Robert Ludlow. He lived in Alton, Illinois in the 1920s and 30s. It was not that long ago. Dude was 9 feet tall. Like 9 feet tall, close to the same height as Goliath. So yeah, human beings have the genetic ability, the genetic markers, or at least we did at one time, have the genetic markers for giantism. What Moses is telling us is just simply, there were giants then, just like there are now. So there were pretty impressive people back then. That's all he's saying. There was tall people back then too. But then he says, when continue on in verse 4, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them, all right, they bore children with them. Now, there are people who point out in Mark chapter, I believe it's 6, it's either Mark 6 or Mark 8, that says that angels do not or cannot procreate. Remember the whole thing, the Sadducees came to Jesus and said a certain woman had a husband and he died, and then she married again, married his brother and he died, and then married his brother and he died, and after all is said and done, she had 7 husbands, and then she also died. And they asked, whose wife was she in, or whose wife is she in the resurrection? Now, first of all, you need to understand that, that the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. Neither did they believe in angels. That's actually a well-known fact about the Sadducees. They did not believe in the miraculous. They did not believe in the supernatural. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They did not believe in angels. So when Jesus then turns to them and says, you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God, they will, in the resurrection, will be like the angels. He just said, yeah, the resurrection is real and angels are real. So challenging their fundamental beliefs. But he says, and it's important to understand what he says there. For time's sake, we're not going to turn to it. What he says, not what you think he says, what he says is that they will be like the angels of God in heaven who do not procreate. He did not say like angelic beings who cannot procreate. Angels of God who are in heaven are the good angels who only follow and obey God. He didn't say anything about demons. He didn't say anything about fallen angels. He said the angels of God who are in heaven. And he said of them, they do not procreate. Neither are they given in marriage. They do not marry, they're not given in marriage. Which doesn't mean that they can't. It says that they don't. There's a big difference. So if you have anybody who says, well, it can't be angel, it can't be demons, it can't be angelic people because they don't procreate. No. Read it again. It says they don't procreate, doesn't say they can't. And they're the angels of God who are obedient to God, not angel. And by the way, why do you think God was so upset when they did it? Now, I'm not going to go into it. You could go into it yourself in book of Jude and book of 2 Peter. There's this, and also I think even in Revelation 9, you have this race of demons who are in the pit, in the abyss, who are in chains, who are awaiting judgment. Somehow they did something wrong, and they got themselves in serious trouble so that they have been waiting punishment. They've been waiting in the pit, the abyss, in chains, waiting to be released in Revelation 9. That it's possible that that's these demons. I don't know. I don't know that we need to even go there. All right, then who are their children? It says, and children were born to them. And they bore with them. They had children. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. That's the children of this unholy union. The children are the mighty men of renown, the men of old. It's not the Nephilim. So context is king. Pretty easy answer. Anybody got anything with that? Did that answer the question? That's my take on it. Yeah.
It does answer the question, but do we have any stories of the mighty men of renown?
No, I don't think so. It's some have suggested that these are the origin stories for things like the Epic of Gilgamesh, some of the mythologies. The problem with that is, to me, it would be if there were stories. He's talking the term men of renown, meaning that they did acts of renown. They did things that people were well aware of. But we probably don't have that. Whatever stories were told of these men, they knew of them, probably because Noah and his sons probably talked about them. Like, man, that one, that was the Cyclops and or whatever. I don't know. I'm just making it up, right? It was like one was Wolverine and another one was Iron Man, right? I honestly think that it would be just more the origin of superhero stories, right? Or the ancient superhero stories like Thor and Loki and, there's the modern superhero stories. Solomon said that there's nothing new under the sun. All right, anybody else have questions on that one? Yeah.
What do you think? I know it was written under a pseudonym and 3 different authors, but do you think there's any part of the book of Enoch that is profitable?
So the book of Enoch is quoted in the book of Jude. Let me rephrase that. There is a statement in the book of Jude that is also found in the book of Enoch. There is some serious question as to which one came first. I actually think, because he doesn't say, well, as the book of Enoch says, and then quotes. He just says it. What is stated in the book of Jude is the content of a prophecy that Enoch gave. Right? Enoch, who was one of the ancestors of Noah, I think he was like his grandfather, prophesied about the flood. And while we don't have that prophecy in the book of Genesis, Jude tells us that that's what it was. It's very likely that Jude is quoting a Jewish tradition. This happens a lot. Paul names the two magicians in Egypt, Janus and Jambres. They're not named in the Bible. They're not named in the book of Exodus, but Paul gives us their names. Well, where did he get those names from? Well, those are names that were given to them in Hebrew tradition. Like the Jews kind of embellished, they gave some name, and by the way, Janus and Jambres means like useless and stupid or something like that. And so that's what they called them. So he's just like, he's quoting tradition. Remember, Paul is talking to Timothy, who knew the scriptures when he was a child, so he grew up learning the scriptures as a child. So he heard the story of Janus and Jambres, probably was told names and given those names. So was it their actual names? Probably not. It was probably just what they were called by the Hebrew people later. So the same thing goes with like an actual prophecy that's stated that Enoch prophesied about the thing. That's what Jude is quoting. Jude is quoting they're both quoting a Jewish tradition, not Jude is quoting First Enoch. So First Enoch is a Gnostic text and is otherwise I like to call it Bible fanfic, right? And just like Book of Mormon, just like a lot of the apocalypses and such. It's trying to make it sound like the Bible, but it's not. Book of Enoch is accepted by the Ethiopian Coptic church, and they accept a whole bunch of stuff. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. No, Enoch did not have a whole lot of time to write anything. I mean, he lived like 300 years, and then he was taken up by God. Didn't have a lot of time to write anything. Okay. I feel like we're like way off all the topics, but I think we're okay. I did want to have some time for you guys to ask questions, a little more discussion. You guys probably have a whole bunch of questions. And I don't want you to leave this class tomorrow and be like, he never answered that question that I had. All right? All right, let's vote on another topic in the time we have left. All right, day 4, Thursday. All right. Of the topics that are remaining for us, we have what we just looked at was there really a Noah's Ark and flood? That was chapter 10. Before that, chapter 7, doesn't carbon-14 dating disprove the Bible? Chapter 9, does radiometric dating prove the earth is old? Chapter 11, how did animals spread all over the world from where the ark landed? And chapter 14, can catastrophic plate tectonics explain flood geology? All right, so those are our potential ones. Yeah?
What is the difference between radiometric dating and carbon dating?
Well, if you pick one, you'll find out. If you pick... Sorry, yeah. Radiometric dating has to do with dating rocks themselves, like just rocks, whereas carbon dating has to do with dating fossils and living tissues. Carbon has to do with life, right? Carbon dioxide, our bodies are made up of carbon, and so carbon is left over from living matter, whereas radiometric dating is just rocks that don't have that aren't fossils. Okay. Anybody else have a question statement? Yeah.
I think we should do one of those so we don't have to read about it.
What's that?
I think we should do one of those so we don't have to read and write about it.
All right. Well, you guys ready to vote? Would anybody like to advocate for one to try to convince your fellow classmates that this is the one we should do? All right. Other than this idea here, otherwise you're going to have to pick one of those, and it's quite sciencey.
If we do the one that I want to do, which is tectonic plates, then we only have half an hour, so we're not going to really get
Yeah, we can't really dig into whatever we pick. So
All right. All right, now you guys got a whole gamesmanship going on here. You got some strategy involved as to which one you should pick. Okay, here we go. Who would like Chapter 7, carbon dating? 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, all right, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, that's quite a few, carbon dating. All right, remember you can vote as early and often as you'd like. What about radiometric dating? Anybody radiometric dating? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, close. All right, we already did chapter 10. What about chapter 11? How did the animals spread all over the world from where the ark rested? 1, 2, 3. Okay, wow, that's... It's like, hey, shh. I want to read that one. All right, how about chapter 14? Can catastrophic plate tectonics explain flood geology? All right, carbon dating it is. Here we go. Don't share. Don't share. Here we go. Nope, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right. It's not chapter 7. Hold on. What did happen there? What happened? Radiometric dating. No, not radiometric dating. Carbon 14 dating. Chapter 7. Well, that's not right. Okay, here we go. I had the wrong. It had the wrong title slide on there for some reason. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about carbon dating. So, carbon dating. The concept of carbon dating is fairly simple. Okay, the idea is that you guys have done a little bit of chemistry, perhaps. Okay, if you know anything about chemistry, an atom has 3 parts to it. Right? What are the 3 parts of the atom? Anybody want to take a guess? Electron, neutron, proton. Okay, electron, neutron, proton. So you have when you have a electron, neutron, proton, that is a stable atom when you have the same number of each of those things. If you have an extra electron, you end up with what? Okay, you end up with a charged particle. You have it's an ion. You have a charged particle. If you have the same number of protons with varying number of neutrons, however, you have what's called an isotope. An isotope is an atom that is unstable. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, so what happens is, as you breathe, okay, what do you breathe in? There we go. All right, you got it. We breathe in oxygen. We're all awake today. All right, you breathe in oxygen. What do you breathe out? Carbon dioxide, right? So what is the first element that is in the carbon dioxide? Carbon. Okay, the carbon comes from, what happens is you breathe in oxygen, and the carbon and hydrogen atoms that are in your system attach to that oxygen, and as your body uses the one oxygen, it then comes out as carbon dioxide. Okay, so you have oxygen. There's, if I remember correctly, please don't quote me on this. My chemistry is terrible. All right, O2, is that right? O2 oxygen comes in, CO2 goes out. So what happened? You had oxygen goes in, attaches to a carbon, and then goes out. So what you're doing is you are releasing carbon from your body, which is why plants breathe in carbon dioxide. Why? Because they need the carbon. And so the plants use the carbon, and they excrete oxygen, which is why we have now an equilibrium of plants and animals, breathing in oxygen, breathing out carbon dioxide, and going back and forth. If you have a carbon monoxide, you die. Carbon dioxide is what you breathe out. Carbon monoxide is what you die if you breathe in. That's why you have a carbon monoxide detector in your house. It says you don't want that. All right. Now, here's what happens. As we grow, as our bodies are living, our bodies use a certain isotope of carbon. That's carbon that is kind of, this is the living kind of carbon. Again, I'm simplifying here for you a little bit. This is carbon that living animals have, is carbon 14. It's very unstable, and it is radioactive. Most of it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, comes from the sun, because as we're growing in the sun, and the kind of carbon that we use, particularly coming from plants, as we eat plants, and even if you're a carnivore, you eat meat that meat ate plants, right? And so you're taking in carbon 14, living matter. You have, in order to eat, you need carbon 14. You need carbohydrates. You need the kind of elements that will keep you living, right? But when you die, you stop breathing. And when you stop breathing, you no longer have, and you stop eating, and you stop bringing in carbon, you start taking in carbon 14, the carbon that is in your body, or any living being's body, plants, animals, doesn't matter, begins to decay from carbon 14, which is unstable and radioactive, down to a stable carbon 12. Because if you look at a periodic table, when you look at a periodic table, carbon is number 12 on the periodic table because that's the number of protons it has. Yes?
Does that mean that, like, if you were to fast and not eat for a while, your carbon levels would go down?
I mean, you got other... you're
Like, you're still breathing out carbon, but not eating it in.
you still have to take something in, right? Eventually, you're going to have to take something in.
Yeah, but like,
Yeah.
if you are eating and get carbon dated,
No, it's because your body is still alive, the carbon is not degrading. Okay, it remains carbon 14 for as long as you're alive, as long as you have living tissue. As long as your tissues are alive. As soon as there is what's called necrosis. Right? Necrosis is the process by which living tissue dies. Okay? And so as living tissue dies, it begins to degrade from carbon 14 to carbon 12. That is an aspect of radiometric, or sometimes called radiocarbon decay. As that decays, we know we can measure the amount of time that it takes for carbon 14 atoms to decay into carbon 12 atoms. We know the time, and the time is measured in what's called a half-life. Okay? A half-life tells you how much time it takes for an amount to go from this much to half of that. All right? That's the rate at which it decays, the rate at which it decreases for the carbon 14 to carbon 12. So, in theory, we should be able to take any something that was living and measure the amount of carbon 12 in it and the amount of carbon 14 in it. And if we know the amount of carbon 14 to begin with, if we assume that there was 100% carbon 14 in it, and now we know it's this much, it's this percentage, we should be able to calculate how long ago that thing died, when it started to decay. Okay? So we talked about the structure of atoms, the proton, the electron, the neutron. An isotope has the same number of protons but varying number of neutrons. There are carbon isotopes, carbon-12, carbon-13, carbon-14. Carbon-14 is the one that we have in living structures. And radioactive decay happens when unstable isotopes transform into the other elements at measurable rates. We can see it go from carbon-14 to carbon-12. So how does it happen? Well, cosmic rays hit the atmosphere, convert nitrogen into carbon-14. So, yeah, you guys are all the Fantastic Four because you've all been hit with cosmic rays. And what's really cool is that means that you're living. Carbon combines with oxygen in our system. All right, carbon combines with oxygen in the system. We breathe it out, and it's absorbed by plants, becoming CO2. All right, so living things have a constant ratio of C14 and C12. Carbon-14, carbon-12. It's an equilibrium in your system. Okay, it's an equilibrium in your system. After death, that intake stops. Carbon-14 begins to decay into nitrogen. All right, so what comes off is nitrogen. That's where you get most of your methane from. Right? You combine nitrogen with hydrogen, you get methane. That's what natural gas is. And the half-life of C14 to C12, scientists measure the remaining amount of C14. The half-life of C14 is 5,730 years. Okay, so 5,730 years. So that's about as old as the Earth is, at least according to the Bible. All right, that's how long it takes for it to go halfway down. And what's that? They can measure it. They can measure the decay rate. They can actually, what they do is they measure it here, and then they measure it here, and then they take that amount of time and they say, okay, that's how much it would be here. And if they said if it continues on that rate, it would be at half when it gets to 5,700 years. Okay, so yeah, they can only measure obviously the slice that they can measure, but what they're doing is they're assuming then that rate was always the same. That's actually going to be a problem that we're going to get to. They're going to assume that the rate was always the same. There's several assumptions that they have to make. Actually a bunch of assumptions that they have to make. The first assumption is that the atmosphere, the mix of C14 and C12 in the atmosphere is always constant. They have to assume that when I breathe in carbon-14, when I take in carbon-14, when my body has carbon-14, that's always the amount. Remember, there's a ratio between 14 and 12. You always have a ratio. There's always a bit of 14, always a bit of 12. The first assumption is that ratio has always been the same. That there was never a time when the cosmic rays were hitting Earth at a greater rate and had more C14 in the system. It would have to be exactly the same all the time, constant rate. There's no other time when the Earth had a different kind of atmosphere that absorbed cosmic rays at a different rate than today. That's one major assumption. The Earth has always been exactly the way it is. By the way, we call this uniformitarianism. That the rate of decay of things, what they say is they'll say the present is the key to the past. They say everything is as it used to be. By the way, Bible has something to say about that. You know, in 2 Peter chapter 3, it says, in the last days there will be scoffers. And you know what it says those scoffers will say? They will say, everything is as it has been since the creation. And they will deny, and very specifically he says they will deny the flood. They will deny that the waters prevailed, that the waters were above the earth. They deny that. Peter very specifically says that they will deny it, and that they will preach uniformitarianism, that everything is as it always has been. The world has never been any different than it is today. Cosmic rays are the same. C14 is the same. The amount that we have in our system is the same. All right. The second assumption is very similar to it. It assumes a closed system, meaning no C14 can escape, no C14 can or C12 can be added. All right. It must always decay at the exact same rate in a closed system. Third assumption is that the decay rates have always been constant. Has there been any time in which the decay rate may have gone faster, or is it possible that the decay rate accelerates, or rather slows down, that it was accelerated at the beginning, like as if it were to fall off a cliff and then even out later? Or is it always a straight line from one place to the other? All right, so those are your three assumptions. It would be like watching a truck drive down the road with stacks of paper in it. And you say, wow, there's a truck driving down the road with stacks of paper in it. There's paper flying out the back. And as the paper flies out the back, you can count the pages that fly out the back. And you say, wow, I can see that 15 pages flies out of the back of that truck every minute. And I can see the truck. I can see that I can actually count the amount of paper that's in that truck and trying to determine where that truck came from. Oh, I can tell that truck came from Philadelphia. Well, how do you know it came from Philadelphia? Well, you see, it's a constant rate of paper flying out of the back of the truck, and the truck has this much paper in it. Assuming it was full, assuming that the paper has always been flying out of the back of it at the exact same rate, assuming that he didn't make any stops along the way to pick up more paper, he left from Philadelphia. Those are really big assumptions that you just made. You're saying that you know exactly where that truck came from based on the current view of that truck. You have no idea where that truck actually, by the way, if that truck then said on the side, Dubuque, Iowa, and you insisted that he came from Philadelphia because of the amount of paper that came on the back, right? That's what you're doing. You're assuming things when you already have the answer. Okay. The problems with this, there's evidence that the atmosphere is not in equilibrium even today. The atmosphere is not in equilibrium even today. We know that the Earth's magnetic field alters C14 production. By the way, if it's cosmic rays that are affecting it, then we know that the electromagnetic field around the Earth prevents cosmic rays from entering the atmosphere, which is why we have the aurora borealis, as the cosmic rays, the rays from the sun, radiation bounces off of the atmosphere. That's the electromagnetic field that you're seeing. It's not just sun rays, which gives us the aurora, but it's also cosmic rays. Okay? And that's the electromagnetic field that you're seeing. That's why we have magnets on the Earth. It's why we have a North Pole and a South Pole. Okay? Pre-flood biosphere had vastly more carbon. Okay? It's very likely that when God made the Earth, it was flooded with carbon, carbon-14. Let's see here. This guy, Dr. Libby, recognized the imbalance of carbon-14 dating. This is the guy that invented the thing. He said, it's imbalanced, but I'm going to dismiss it. It's still not in equilibrium even today. So again, that assumption needs to be considered. Magnetic field is weaker today. It was stronger in the past. By the way, that in and of itself tells us the Earth is young because the electromagnetic field, as the Earth is protected from cosmic rays and solar radiation by the electromagnetic field, and it's also how we get magnets, which is how we get electricity. That's why it's the electromagnetic field, right? That field is weakening, and we can measure the rate of weakening of that field. It used to be stronger. It is now weaker. The poles are also shifting. How many of you have ever done any kind of navigating or what is that called? When you use a compass and a map and a, oh my goodness. Yeah, anyway. How many of you have used a magnetic compass before? Oh, quite a few, good. Okay. Using a magnetic compass up here is actually kind of difficult. Why? Why is it more difficult to use a magnetic compass here in Alaska than it is in the lower 48? Yeah, so your north points to magnetic north. Magnetic north is not the same as polar north. The polar north, the poles, there's two different ways of defining it. There's the axis pole, which is what the Earth spins on. But then there's magnetic north. And right now, magnetic north is moving, and it's moving very fast. It has been for the last several decades. It's actually was in Russia. It's now has raced across the North Pole and is now in northern Canada. And it's not just moving in one direction, it's kind of moving all over the place, that magnetic north. And now, normally, most places, inhabitable places on Earth, that's generally north. It's still pretty close to north, right? But we have evidence, and it is possible that not only could that magnetic north move around the North Pole, it is possible that there is a magnetic shift, a polarity shift, where the magnetic north races all the way around to the other side of the globe and points down while the magnetic south points up. A magnetic polarity shift. And what atheistic scientists believe is that the fact that the electromagnetic field is weakening, if you trace that back too far, if it's been weakening the same amount and you use the same uniformitarianism that they use for everything else, about 10,000 years ago, the electromagnetic field would have been so strong, life on Earth would not have existed. Would have been impossible with the electromagnetic field that strong. Well, that's what I'm saying. Is that? But if you trace that weakening back in time to when it was stronger, there's a point about 10,000 years ago where it's so strong, life on Earth couldn't exist. Just 10,000 years. So what's the atheist answer for that? Well, the poles shift. And the magnetic north goes to magnetic south goes to magnetic north. Okay, I don't know if you know anything about magnets or not. You don't really need to know a whole lot about magnets to know that that is a horrible sleight of hand. Because polarity has nothing to do with strength. You can turn a magnet over and the other side of the magnet isn't any stronger than the other side. You can have a polarity shift, and that polarity shift doesn't do anything to the strength. And so it is impossible for the Earth to be anything older than 10,000 years old. And they know it. And all they can do is a sleight of hand to say, well, the poles shift. Polarity shift. That doesn't do anything to the strength. Okay. That being said, we know that 6,000 years ago, the electromagnetic field was very, 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 very strong. It was very, very strong, which means that we would expect to see less carbon-14 because it would disperse those cosmic rays. So there would be less in the system to begin with. So we can't just simply say, okay, we can go back to when it was in equilibrium from before. All right, let's move forward. Oh, there. I had a graphic the whole time. It was actually the very next slide to show you that. Okay, so So that's the electromagnetic field with the magnetic north pole, geographic north pole. Right now it's at about 11.5 degrees. That is changing rapidly. Say it again. Yeah, because the magnetic north pole is just moving. It's shifting. It's hard to. I don't know that it's random. I don't think it's random, but it has to do with the molten. So the Earth, the inside of the Earth is not rock. The inside of the Earth is liquid. It's molten, mostly lead. All right, and as that molten lead is turning along with us because we're rotating, right? As we orbit, as we rotate one rotation per day, all of that liquid iron is also rotating. That's why you have that. As that's moving, what's that? I'm sorry, did I say iron? Oh, now I don't remember which one it is. I think you're right, it's iron. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yes, it is iron. So as that's moving around, you're right. I forget. Man, now I don't know. Now I don't know. I said lead. I said iron. It's one of the two. I cannot remember which one it is. Whatever it is, I have a graphic on the other slide that has it. But as that's sloshing around, as that's moving around, that magnet it's like fluid. All right, and that's why it's moving so much. All right. Yeah, you're right. Iron would be magnetic. Lead is not magnetic. No, lead is from the radiocarbon or from the radiometric dating from later when it's uranium to lead. I'm kind of tired. It's almost lunchtime. All right, so where are we at here? So magnetic field decay, strong field equals fewer cosmic rays equals less carbon-14 production in the past, which means that you cannot start with the same equilibrium that we would have today. Okay, so less carbon-14. So the dating methods assume constant levels, which then inflates the ages. All right, we also have a flood. We know that vast carbon deposits were buried. We actually know that. We have coal, we have oil all over the planet. We're drilling it out as fast as we can. The pre-flood biosphere possibly had 500 times more carbon in it. By the way, it's very likely that we had a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases, carbon in the atmosphere. You want to talk about global warming? The entire globe was warm before the flood. There were no polar ice caps. The whole Earth was a tropical paradise. Kind of. There was also thorns in the garden, at least, was. And I say that there was no carbon, wow, I am really tired. There was no polar ice caps. There was, and there were no high mountains. There were no large salted seas. Okay, and so there's lots of plants. If you have lots of plants, you have a lot of carbon dioxide being eaten up, and a lot of carbon in that's being eaten up by plants. Okay. Any age estimates using carbon-14 before the flood will give much older dates than the true age. Okay, so if you date something prior to the flood. So this was all done by a group called the RATE Project. You can read about it in this one. This book right here. This is Don DeYoung. He led the RATE Project, R-A-T-E. R-A-T-E stands for, if I can get it here. Hold on. Radio... Oh my goodness, I thought it was right here. Does it say it in the notes? Surely. Radioisotopes and the age of the Earth. All right, RATE. Yeah, you got it already? So that's in this book. They produced this book, and it tells you all about their project that they did. Yeah?
I had a question about the carbon-14 being more in the pre-flood world. So then is there a gap in like the fossil record of like...
I don't know. I think there is, because you go like... If you carbon-14 date something today, like if you say, oh, I need to know how old, you dig up like Abraham Lincoln's body, right? You dig up Abraham Lincoln's body. I want to know when did Abraham Lincoln die? right? I can carbon-14 radiometric date his body, and it would give me a precise date of 1865, right? I can do that for a couple of thousand years. It seems, and this is me, it seems that you get to about 3,000-4,000 years ago, and all of a sudden it's like, and this is 100,000 years old. This is 1,000,000 years old. This is like, did we not have anything happen in this world from like 100,000 to about 4,000? Did like nothing happen in there? Because it seems like all the dates have to go hundreds of thousands, if not millions and billions of years, and nothing in between. So yeah, I would say that, but I don't know that for sure. Okay, so that's the RATE project, radioisotopes in the age of the Earth. It's right up there for you. It was an 8-year research project to determine carbon-14. Their findings: detectable carbon-14 in ancient samples. They fossilized wood dated millions of years by the standard methods, contained measurable C14. Coal samples from different geological ages all contain C14. Diamonds, thought to be billions of years old, still contain C14. By the way, diamonds are basically carbon. Am I a slide ahead? Sorry about that. There you go. Thank you. Since C14 decays quickly, its presence is evidence that these materials are thousands, not millions or billions, certainly not billions of years old. All right. I think we can close off right there. Any other questions about carbon-14 or whatever? Actually, I'll leave you with this parable. It was on this other slide. I wanted to show it to you. Come on. There it is. I wanted a nice image there to tell you the story. Okay. This is the parable of the candle. Okay? I'll leave you with this today. The parable of the candle. Husband, loving husband, the power goes out in the house. He's alone at home. His wife is out. She's been working all day. She's a teacher in the public school system. I don't know why that detail just popped in. It's like my wife is. And the power goes out. So he lights a candle. And but then he also realizes that they need some supplies from the store if the power's going to be out for a long time. So he lights a candle, and he leaves a note for his wife. And it says, "Power's out. I'm leaving for the store. It's 2 o'clock in the it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll be back in about an hour." She gets home from work. It's 5 o'clock. And she looks at that note. She reads the note. The note says that he's been gone an hour. It says that he should be back soon. And it says there that the power's been out for about an hour. But she looks at that candle. She gets to thinking, that candle's awful low. And she knows that that kind of candle is usually really tall. But that candle's now only this big. And she knows that candles burn at a regular rate. She can even measure how much the candle has burned even since she got home. She starts to get upset because that candle has obviously been burning much longer than an hour. That candle's been burning all day. He wrote that note earlier. He's been gone out all day golfing with his buddies. He's not at the store. He gets home. She's in a tirade. She's screaming. She's throwing stuff. How dare you go out with your buddies? How dare you be gone all day? You knew that there were chores that needed to be done. You said in your note that you were only gone for an hour, but that candle proves that you've been gone for much, much longer. And he looks at her and he says, "Did you not read my note?" She said, "I read your note, but I know that that's a lie. You lied in your note because the candle says you've been gone longer." He says, "Sweetie, I got that candle out of the drawer. We've used that candle every night. That candle is a month old. It was the only candle I could find. It was a small candle, I know, but I wrote you a note telling you exactly how long I was gone. That's exactly what we've done with carbon-14 dating, with radiometric dating. We have the note. We have the letter that tells us exactly how long ago God created. But we're looking at the candle saying, that must be a lie. I know how long that candle's been burning. I know how long that carbon-14 has been decaying. I know how long that radioactive decay has been happening in those rocks. I don't know anything about the initial conditions. I don't know anything about the rate of decay. But I'm going to believe what I think rather than what I can read. All right? Well, I'll leave you with that parable to be thinking about as you do your homework on these other subjects. All right? Very good. Yes, question?
Representing the collective student body,
Yes.
would we only be assigned one chapter for homework?
Is this your last homework assignment? All right, I'm a softie, yeah. Just one chapter tonight. Just one chapter tonight. Since you asked so nicely.
I've heard that same one before, except what it was last time was, little did she know that he had burnt it down with a blowtorch.
Oh, he burned out with a blowtorch, okay.
And so that's representing like some catastrophic.
Yeah. Well, the way it came to me was actually not for atheists, but it was more directed toward Christians because of old earth Christians. And
Right.
what the accusation is that if God created with the appearance of age, like if that's the way God created, and we just simply say, well, God created Adam as a man, not as a baby.
Right.
So we would assume that like the rocks themselves, he would not create rocks that are pure uranium that are decaying to lead.
Yeah.
Right? He would have created rocks that have some decay in them already, not because he's creating something bad, because that's radiometric decay is not evil. It's just the amount of lead that's in a rock.
Yeah.
But their response to that is then God is deceiving us. Because why would he create something with the appearance of age so that we would be deceived because he wrote us a note telling us how he did it.
Yeah.
That's not deception, man. I wasn't trying to deceive you.